thank you very much because you are here. I hope we'll have very interesting debate. Thank you for my colleagues, MEP, Mr. Bill Newton Dunn, Renew Group, political group, and Mr. Frank Bogovic. He is member in EPP political group. I am Maria Grappini, and I am Vice President for Internal Market for European Parliament, and I am two member in TRAN committee, in AFCO, and in CONT committee. Because we have in this evening, we have interpretation in Romania, in Germany, in English, in French. You have number of, for French it's number 3, for English it's 2, for Germany it's 1, and for Romania 22. Now I speak in my language because it's much better for me, so sorry. It's okay? Good. We start. De ce? Why? De ce facem această dezbatere? Poate că este prima întrebare pe care o puneți, ne o punem toți. În primul rând vreau să vă mulțumesc tuturor că sunteți aici, indiferent pe cine reprezentați, din ce țară veniți, să mulțumesc presei, pentru că eu cred că avem nevoie de transparență, avem nevoie de informație, avem nevoie de cunoaștere și, sigur, de comunicare. Mă bucur foarte mult că 4 grupuri politice, iată, membrii acestor grupuri politice ale Parlamentului European au convenit ca astăzi să facem o dezbatere, cred eu, importantă pentru viitorul Europei. Importantă pentru viitorul Europei, importantă pentru fiecare țară membră a Uniunii Europene, dar importantă și pentru business, pentru oamenii de afaceri, pentru cetățeni până la urmă. Am structurat dezbaterea din această seară pe 3 panele: securitate cibernetică, promovarea încrederii, transparenței și cooperării. Punctul al 2-lea panel: dispute în comerț, punerea lanțului de aprovizionare global. Al 3-lea, cooperare digitală internațională, consolidarea pe fiecare continent a punctelor forte pentru dezvoltarea unei suveranități digitale europene. Am să fac o scurtă introducere pentru a putea să avem după aceea puncte de vedere, inclusiv va fi un panel de întrebări pentru presă. În prezent, lumea devine din ce în ce mai digitalizată și avansează tehnologic zilnic. În calitatea mea de vicepreședintă a Comisiei pentru Piața Internă și Protecția Consumatorului, știu cât de important este să avem un sistem digital global sustenabil și eficient. În aceeași măsură, securizarea sistemelor de rețea și informații în Uniunea Europeană este esențială pentru menținerea economiei online funcționale, pentru asigurarea prosperității, pentru protejarea pieței interne, dar și a consumatorului. Uniunea Europeană lucrează pe mai multe fronturi pentru a promova tehnologii moderne, dar și, sigur, cibersecuritatea în Uniunea Europeană. Vreau să vă spun că știu că avem presă care este informată, probabil mai multă lume cunoaște că vechea Comisie Europeană, suntem în pragul preluării mandatului de către o nouă comisie, comisarul Ansip, spunea, între altele, că tehnologia 5G va transforma economia noastră și societatea, deschizând oportunități masive pentru cetățeni și companii. Dar nu putem accepta aceste activități fără a avea securitate totală. Trebuie să luăm în serios aceste riscuri și trebuie să ne grăbim, a declarat comisarul Ansip, care a deținut și funcția de vicepreședinte a Comisiei Europene, responsabil pe piața unică digitală. După cum știm, responsabilitățile sunt partajate. Evident, Comisia Europeană și-a propus ca până la sfârșitul anului acesta să aibă clarificată situația privind introducerea tehnologiei 5G. Statele membre, conform recomandării Comisiei Europene, au 15 luni pentru a găsi măsuri fezabile care să asigure și implementarea noii tehnologii, dar, evident, și securizarea rețelelor. Sunt sigur avantaje, pentru că dacă ne gândim la competitivitatea Europei pe piața mondială, nu putem să nu ne gândim la noi tehnologii, tehnologia 5G, care evident va înlocui tehnologia 4G. La nivel mondial, sigur, sunt venituri generate, spun specialiștii, echivalentul a 225 de miliarde de euro până în 2025. Beneficiile introducerii tehnologiei 5G în 4 sectoare industriale esențiale, și anume autovehicule, sănătate, transporturi și energie, pot să ajungă la 114 miliarde euro pe an. Evident, se vorbește în analiza făcută și de locuri de muncă noi create, peste 2 milioane. Pe această bază, statele membre vor stabili de comun acord un set de măsuri de reducere a riscurilor care să poată fi utilizate pentru a combate riscurile în materie de securitate cibernetică identificate la nivel național și la nivelul Uniunii. Printre aceste măsuri putem să avem, de exemplu, cerințe de certificare, teste, controale, precum și identificarea produselor sau a furnizorilor care sunt considerați posibil nesiguri. Statele membre au libertatea să decidă introducerea unei tehnologii noi sau nu. Pentru că avem foarte mult de discutat, aș vrea să mă opresc cu introducerea aici și, sigur, să începem să intrăm în desfășurător. Și avem mulți înscriși la cuvânt, sper să putem să ne descurcăm. Colegii mei vor modera câte un panel și sper ca întrebările care le veți pune să poată să clarifice anumite lucruri care sunt discutate acum în piața globală. Procedura de a ne înscrie la cuvânt este clar cu ridicare de mână. Sper că asistenții mei sunt aici ca să putem prelua și nota toate încercăm să dăm cuvântul la toți cei care vor să ia cuvântul. Evident că fără actori în domeniul tehnologiei nu am putea să facem nimic, fără industrie. Vă mărturisesc că eu sunt inginer de profesie, industriaș, așadar iubesc tehnologiile noi. Nu am putea să facem nimic. Aș vrea o scurtă introducere să aibă și colegii mei legat de această dezbatere, foarte scurt, doar să se prezinte, după care vor modera un panel. Primul, Mr. Bogovic.
Good evening to everybody. As Ms. Grpini said, my name is Franz Bogovic. I am from Slovenia. I am in Agri and Regi Committee. I am not Pilar Castillo, who should be here, our EPP colleague from European Internet Forum. Unfortunately, she had some accident yesterday and she cannot be here, so she asked me, and for me it was a big pleasure to come here. I see many people who are interested in these important topics. As Agri and Regi member, I work also on one topic of smart villages. All we know, and we did a lot in the last 10-15 years in topic of smart villages, but as a man who lived in rural areas and I know what this new technology means, I see a big gap between rural and urban areas, and I see a lot of opportunities also in rural areas to empower with broadband connection, to empower people with skills, and give them a similar possibility to life in rural areas as in cities. And also there are topics about cybersecurity, other things what we will speak in my panel. And so again, I wish you a nice evening and good debate and good conclusions of this day.
Now my colleague Newton Dunn.
Very good, thank you. Nothing to add except I'm Bill Newton-Dunn, I'm the Liberal here, the Renew Group. I'm a member of the Transport Committee, and the only thing I would say is remind everybody, we've got a lot of people here. If you want to speak, as our chair lady said, put up your hand and switch on your microphone, because we've got these brilliant interpreters who can give us all the languages. If you don't use the microphone, they can't hear you and we don't get the benefit. So let's start.
Okay. Așadar, ne-ați cunoscut pe cei trei, sper să ajungă și al patrulea coleg. Spun să intrăm în prezentări. Prima persoană care va vorbi în această seară și sper să ne spună lucruri interesante este domnul Abraham Liu. Îl invit la microfon pentru a-l putea vedea. Este reprezentantul firmei Huawei la instituțiile europene. I hope 10 minutes is enough, because in Parliament we have 1 minute, 2 minutes. Okay, very synthetic.
Thank you, Madam Grappilli, honourable MEPs, dear guests. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting Huawei to this debate in this European Parliament. My name is Abraham Liu. I'm the Chief Representative of Huawei to the EU institutions. And also, I'm one of the 96,700 employees who owns this company. I have been in Huawei for nearly 20 years, and I spent 9 years in Africa, 6 years in Asia Pacific, and 2 years here in Europe. I remember when I was in Africa, where the connectivity was a major problem. One solution we provided is a simplified radio access network product, which was very well received by the operators because of its simplicity, low cost, and low power consumption. And to my surprise, that product didn't come from China. It came out from a joint innovation between Huawei and Vodafone in Europe. And that product later enabled hundreds of millions extra more people to be connected. I'm very proud of it. Lacking of connectivity not only exists in Africa, it also happens in some parts of Europe. Imagine a remote village, unconnected village in your country. With connectivity arriving, it will enable people to use the internet to promote businesses, to do Airbnb type commerce, to sell local products online, and most importantly, to get connected with their family members or friends outside the village. This is something Huawei has been doing for the last 30 years to improve the quality of people's everyday lives. And yes, we are very proud of that. Leave nobody behind is what Europe is all about, and ensuring connectivity is what Huawei is all about. Together with our customers, we bring business opportunities, provide better healthcare, better education, and entertainment access to every citizen. But we also provide another form of connectivity. We enabled the world's first 4G network in Oslo, Norway, in 2009. And now we are working together with the European operators to deploy the first wave of 5G network in Europe. We further boosted the awareness of brands Leica, a leading iconic German brand, to tens of millions of new customers globally. And we partnered with more than 150 leading European universities in their fundamental research to strengthen Europe's research leadership. And we have 3,500 European companies in our global supply chain. This creates a lot of investments, which in return creates a lot of jobs. And also, we helped the European Union of the Deaf to develop StorySign. It's a free app powered by Huawei AI, artificial intelligence, that reads children's books and translates these books into the sign language. And this can help 32 million deaf children worldwide. And the list goes on. Connectivity is an important issue that Europe is facing. But connectivity is not the only issue we want to discuss today. Huawei has been a trusted partner in Europe for 20 good years. We have grown up together here. But we know you still have questions about us. This is the most important reason why we have come to the European Parliament to answer all your questions. We also understand that the new technologies create opportunities and changes, but changes comes with uncertainty, and uncertainty can bring unease and anxiety. As stated by the President-elect of the European Commission, we have to find a European way. So let's do it together. That's exactly why we plan to work with all of you in partnership to ease fears and create opportunities for Europe's future. The confidence in our ability to provide the most future-oriented technology for Europe is rooted in our long-term commitment in research and development. Over the next 5 years, we are committed to investing over 90 billion euros in research worldwide. That's almost 5 times of NASA's current annual budget. And we are fulfilling this commitment with European experts to focus on high-performance computing, quantum computing, together with many other advanced technologies through Huawei's 23 R&D facilities across 14 European countries. Create jobs, helping local economies, and these technologies are for European industries and will help Europe strengthen its advantages in these areas. And recently, we announced that we are investing millions in Germany, Romania, Spain, and the UK. And just last month, we announced a 70 million euros R&D investment in Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe's values of openness, innovation, and rule of law have made itself a powerhouse for mobile communications. And Huawei shares these values. Innovative companies and European operators have brought the 2G, 3G, and 4G to European citizens and the world. The lifting of mobile roaming charges in 2017 not only benefits the consumers, but also helps Europe's competitiveness. And the introduction of GDPR last year is an excellent initiative which reinforces the core European value to protect the privacy of the citizen. And the model applied in GDPR can also be applied in cybersecurity, which means every company is trusted but also verified. Europe's digital future should be in its own hands. And we welcome Germany's decision yesterday to adopt this model. We believe these initiatives will help Europe to be a leader in the 5G era, continue to be the leader. But leading in 5G is not only about the technology itself, it's actually more about the industrial potential that will be enabled by 5G. If we use a metaphor, 5G is like a tree, but potential released by 5G is like a forest. And here we have something special to offer Europe. The most advanced technologies that can be used to connect the continent and enable Europe to lead the upcoming fourth industrial revolution. To use another metaphor, just like a bicycle, one wheel is European industry and the other is a mobile technology provided by the mobile industry, which Huawei is a part. Only by combining two wheels together can Europe's digital sovereignty truly move forward. We know that the unicycle won't win the Tour de France. Ladies and gentlemen, my 17 years overseas experience makes me understand that not every country has the same culture and values. During my time in Europe, I have been most impressed by the European values of openness, advocacy of multilateralism, an alliance of many countries pursuing a common goal, which is a cornerstone in this current challenging geopolitical environment. Globally, we need to all work together to support this alliance to reduce the future uncertainty and to keep the global political and economic system up to date. Ladies and gentlemen, in Chinese, we have a saying called 求同存异, which means seek common ground while preserving differences. This is in line with the European Union's own motto, united in diversity. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you. I'm ready to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Mulțumim mult. O să aveți ocazia să răspundeți la întrebări. Acum aș dori, pentru a balansa, să avem un alt speaker și îl invit pe domnul Luc Hendricks, director general, Asociația Europeană a Telecomunicației Competitive, ECTA. Please. Here. După aceste două intervenții vom avea un panel de întrebări. After this speaker, okay? Vom avea un panel de întrebări, după care o să predau microfonul colegului meu pentru a intra la primul panel de cybersecurity.
So, thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. Honourable members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, the representative of Huawei, thank you for inviting me here this evening to speak on international digital cooperation, building on each continent's strengths for the development of European digital sovereignty. When preparing for my intervention, my first thought I had were to narrow what is actually meant by European digital sovereignty, as this concept is multidimensional and is quite broad for a 5-minute keynote. Hence, I had to make some choices, and I will limit my intervention to 4 key messages. I started to Google the words digital sovereignty. Now, you will probably think that to illustrate European sovereignty, this is not the best example. I would not disagree. So instead of Google, I turned to Bing. I see also some smiles in the room, and indeed, it did not make a huge difference. Well, I can tell you, I also used DuckDuckGo to address privacy concerns. Although DuckDuckGo is too vested in the US, and some of you might continue to argue. My solution, I eventually used Quant. What does this tell us? As a citizen, I make some choices to exercise my sovereignty. On the individual level, digital sovereignty has to do with individuals owning their data and controlling its use. Taking care of your data means treating them with sovereignty. That was my first message. In the EU, we are united by the values of enlightenment and humanism. These values include a commitment to the dignity of human beings, freedom, equality and solidarity. Those values underpin our laws. The European Cybersecurity Act, the Network and Information Security Directive, the e-Privacy Directive and the General Data Protection Regulation are solid assets of European digital sovereignty. They provide us with a European regulatory framework that is suited to improve the security of personal data and extend that sovereignty principle around the world, notably when it requires foreign dealers in European data to comply with this framework, with GDPR, for example. Hence, the power of the European market, given its size, should not be underestimated, and our values should be at the core of European international collaboration. Free trade is part of it. However, respect of the rule of law, including intellectual property, data and privacy, based on clear evidence, as well as fair competition, so the level playing field, should guide our trade agreements. Building walls for a European fortress is probably not the solution, but does not prevent us from thinking about how to make values and commerce intersect. This was my second message. As I just illustrated, it is important to have choice, and therefore it is important to maintain a sufficient level of competition at all levels of the value or supply chain, even more when the supply chain has globalized. The EU veto on the merger Siemens-Alstom earlier this year has fueled the long-running debate over whether the EU antitrust rules needs to be updated. And we often hear that Europe needs European champions, telecom champions, digital champions, etc., etc. At ECTA, we do not agree with that. We strongly believe in the societal benefits of competition. When commenting on the Siemens-Alstom case, Mrs. Vestager said, without sufficient remedies, this merger would have resulted in higher prices for the signalling system that keep passengers safe and for the next generation of very high-speed trains. Indeed, and I would stress that competition not only has provided lower prices, improved quality and efficiency, but it has also been the fundamental driver of innovation, the driver that forces market players to continue to improve. And don't we all want to see our children pulled upwards in the classroom? This was my third message. Also, let's not forget that most of the biggest tech companies, such as Microsoft, Amazon, Apple or Google, just to mention some, have grown from startups, entrepreneurs that had an idea, vision, and took the risk to put their own money on it. Also, let's not forget that for anyone's success, there are probably hundreds of failures, not one that no one speaks out. So we better act to stimulate a real risk-based European entrepreneurial culture. Well, failure is not a stigma, and when venture capital and global complementary assets are easily accessible to European ICT businesses and startups. Entrepreneurs, those that take risks with their money, those are the champions we should promote. And indeed, we need many more of those. We need to stimulate the appetite of our youth for entrepreneurship. This was my last message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Acum o să avem o sesiune de întrebări. O sesiune de întrebări pentru cei doi speaker. Avem la dispoziție 10-12 minute. Da? Nu putem, după fiecare panel o să avem sesiune de întrebări. Cine dorește să pună prima întrebare? Please. Vă rog să vă și recomandați.
Merci, madame. Ma question s'adresse à monsieur Liu. Il existe une méfiance au sein de l'Union européenne à l'égard de Huawei. Surtout si on prend en compte qu'un certain nombre de pays, les États-Unis entre autres, ont interdit le matériel 5G fabriqué en Chine. Or, le déploiement de la 5G en l'Union européenne est imminent et on parle d'un investissement entre 300 et 500 milliards d'euros, ce qui rendra ces réseaux difficiles à remplacer à court terme une fois qu'ils auront été déployés. Est-ce que vous êtes en mesure d'apporter des preuves solides pour rassurer les citoyens européens qu'ils ne seront pas fichés via la technologie chinoise de la 5G? Ces craintes sont devenues d'autant plus grandes après l'adoption des lois chinoises sur les renseignements nationaux. Ah? Oui, mais je termine. Il s'agit bien des lois qui instaurent l'obligation pour des citoyens et des entreprises de coopérer avec le gouvernement afin de préserver la sécurité nationale. D'où vient la question logique, qui se trouve réellement derrière Huawei? À ce jour, on n'a pas vraiment reçu de réponse crédible.
Thank you. This is a very often asked question. And first of all, as I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, Huawei is 100% owned by employee. It's a private company. So people will always ask what is the relationship between Huawei and the Chinese government. I would say the relationship between Huawei and the Chinese government is as same as the other private company or international company like Ericsson or Nokia, Siemens, who have a huge operation also in China. So our responsibility, our obligation is to pay the tax legally and obey all the laws. And you mentioned, the Chinese intelligence law, and I want to clarify here, there's, according to the third party, the Clifford Chance, the lawyer firm, for their third party reading about the law, that Huawei, we don't have the legal obligation to install any backdoors or something like that to provide it, to put our global customer interests or consumers' interests in danger. And publicly, my founder has stated in many situations, Mr. Ren said, we will never do anything to put our customers' network or data in danger. And our cornerstone for our operation in 170 countries is to have the full compliance to the local law and the international law, including the UN law, EU law, and the US law. So we have never received any instruction like to collect any information or plant any backdoors like that in our previously. And And, as a private company again, myself as a shareholder, all the managers, we don't have any motivation to do anything like that, because if we do anything like that, even a small things like that, it's commit like suicide.
Thank you. Aș vrea să repet tema conferinței. Ok. Nu facem o dezbatere Huawei. Facem o dezbatere privind importanța introducerii 5G în Europa. Asta a fost tema, cu invitați. Avem și Vodafone, avem speaker foarte importanți și aș vrea să nu facem o anchetă aici, ci o dezbatere cum putem în piața Uniunii Europene, în Uniunea Europeană, să avem acest balans între introducerea noilor tehnologii 5G, acum despre asta vorbim, și securitate. Totdeauna la Comisia noastră a piață internă ne gândim la orice reglementare care o luăm, să facem un balans între a lăsa să se dezvolte tehnologia și în a asigura protecția consumatorului, cetățeanului, companiilor. Da? Deci rugămintea mea este să puneți întrebări legate de tema dezbaterii și anume tehnologia 5G în Europa. Despre asta vorbim acum. Please.
I'm Renaud Girard from Le Figaro, it's a French newspaper. I will ask my question in English so that everybody can understand. The question is from Mr. Liu, but also for other speakers. You have seen that Huawei is on a blacklist in America, and you have recently nine more technological Chinese firms which have been put on a blacklist in America. Are we today heading towards a technological partition of the world, the whole world, with let's say America and NATO countries on one side, and maybe China, Africa, and so on the other side? So my question is for everybody, and do you think that this technological partition of the world is good or bad for the European citizens that we are? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This is a very important question. And obviously, there are wind blowed from the other side of the Atlantic. The political wind has put us in a situation where the international companies, technology company, have to think about its supply chain, the continuity of the supply chain, not only Huawei. So that's, in that sense, people are alerted. And if you really ask my personal opinion on this, I would be not that pessimistic, because in our mobile communication technology, for example, it takes so many years from 2G, 3G until 4G. The world used to have different technologies. And now 5G, finally, worldwide, have a unified technology. In that sense, the worldwide, different country, industry has put a lot of effort to achieve this unified standard. And this finally will benefit the end consumer greatly, because it's not affordable for this ICT, for example, this industry, to invest twice in R&D, and then finally the end user will have to pay for that cost. So my call will be, everyone, whatever you can, especially Europe, can play a key role to make sure that we will not meet that point to have like one world, two systems. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as the Director General of ECTA, the European Competitive Telecommunication Association, you hear my voice in English. We represent the alternative operators in Europe, and if I would answer in this way. At the beginning of my career, almost 30 years ago, I worked for a small French company designing telecom equipment that was specialized in protocol conversion, so making systems from different languages to communicate together. And every time you try to create interoperability between one system and another, you lose some functionalities. And if we look at over the 20 years, we have had great benefits from systems and from standardization. Certainly, standardization of 3G is something, and GSM is a really big success story. So at one point, if we would divide, I'm not sure that we would create positive benefits for the European population. The second thing is that, as I said, within all the value chain and the supply chain that is today globalized, so it's a global economy. It's not only European companies buying from other parts of having part of their supply chain outsourced in other parts of the world. It's also very important for the industrial parties in Europe to be able to sell to the rest of the world. And our commercial balance, I think, is quite positive in some areas of the world. And on that, it's very important for the welfare to maintain competition in all the elements of the value chain. Because at the moment that you reduce competition in one of the elements of the value chain, you will decrease quality, you will increase prices, and you will impact innovation. And as Mr. Liu said, and I would agree with this metaphor, 5G is a tree, the benefit of 5G is the forest. And what is and outside from the industrial perspective, it's very important for all the European sectors to achieve a smooth and a quick digital transformation. And for that, if you have a choice and if you are in another sector and you need to buy complementary resources from the telecom side, for example, you want to have the best available on the market. And when the best is available on the market, the parties that offer that will make sure that they can compete. It's what I said in my keynote introduction. Don't we want our children, when they are at the class, to be pulled up? We want to leverage to the better and not to the lower. And so having a diversified offer from product and services, from a diversity of provider, is key to release the innovation potential in all the sectors of the European economy. And that is, in our view, what is at stake. And that is, from a NECTA perspective, why we believe that competition in the telecom side is so important.
Thank you very much. Ok, o să mai putem lua două întrebări, pentru că avem vorbitori foarte importanți, așa cum am spus, și este important să găsim să aflăm cât mai multe puncte de vedere pentru o temă atât de interesantă. Please. Un minut first.
So thank you for this debate, which is indeed very needed, and I believe it's very useful. As technology develops and we see technological advancement, and I believe a lot about the importance of moving along with technology, also a lot of concerns rise. And yes, this is very natural when there are new things coming up, when there's change coming up, always people ask questions and have concerns. And the only method we should address those concerns are with debating, with answering, with clearing and clarifying, and not by shunning opportunities. And with this respect, I wanted to ask about a recent NIS cooperation group report assessing the cybersecurity of 5G networks, which mentions among threats and threat actors, state actors or state-backed actors, which can potentially endanger 5G networks driven by political motivations. For this reason, I would like to ask how companies like Huawei and how other stakeholders could introduce measures to mitigate the risk of third countries on its business operations in Europe, and how we could put the citizens and the enterprises' mind and the stakeholders' mind at rest that this threat will not materialize. Thank you.
Ok. Poate întrebarea era bună la panelul următor, pentru că avem și un avocat aici care va vorbi. Dacă speakerii vor să răspundă la această întrebare, pentru că urmează panelul moderat de colegul meu. Please.
Thank you. This is a very important question, definitely. From what I see, the report is released a few days ago. It's quite objective, and it did mention, some as you just described. My point of view on this would be, cybersecurity is indeed a very important, topic which needs the different stakeholders to talk on the same table. And it's indeed very important, very critical, but political approach. In this case, if you really want to divide the world in a democratic or another kind of different kind of political system, it's not a practical way. Number one, in the ICT industry, all the players, including the one from the US, we have a similar global supply chain, R&D, and so on. So number two, Huawei, we have been maintaining the best track record in terms of the cybersecurity performance in 170 countries. Number three, if you really want to talk about the check and balance or the democratic, we don't forget that in the history or in a few years ago, what has been disclosed, the number one democratic country, actually they are the one who have, some wrongdoing on this kind of technology or information collection. I will not go, to details on that, but that's a fact.
Thank you. You try one answer. For balance, because it's not possible only one speaker.
There is a cybersecurity act, the certification and so on is something very important, and I think we really need to work on that. And what I believe on it is that we really need to look at it from a factual base. And that's what I would like to add is that now we have our members, and so the telecom operators have to roll out and make major investment to roll out 5G networks. There is a lot of pressure from that. Some of them already begin to pay huge amount of money for spectrum and so on. And we need to make sure that we clear as quickly as possible this uncertainty, because this uncertainty is very bad for the investment. And if from Europe we want to stay competitive at the global level, we need to make sure that we do not introduce delays that are not justified or that will not be based on facts. And I believe that's very, very important. Okay? And do not forget our members or all the operators in Europe, they have to invest a lot. And this uncertainty is very bad for the investment.
Thank you. Mulțumesc mult speakerilor. Îi invit în sală pentru că trebuie să vină de la panelul pe care colegul meu, cybersecurity, îl va modera. I don't have time for many questions. Sorry. Please, please, please. Again, one question.
Thank you very much. It's a very short question. We are not allowed to discuss our worry about the integrity of Huawei. It's about 5G. I'm convinced that we need 5G for the future. I was an entrepreneur myself, and I had a telecom company in the Netherlands before I became an MEP. But if this is a debate about 5G, why is Ericsson and Nokia not here? Are they invited?
Yes.
These two questions, please.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
O să vă răspund eu atunci. Da, noi am invitat foarte multă lume la dezbatere, evident, și companiile despre care dumneavoastră ați vorbit. Avem Vodafone aici prezent, va vorbi la panelul următor. Am spus de la bun început că este o dezbatere despre 5G, nu despre Huawei. Am și rugat să nu se pună întrebări doar pentru, dar eu cred că atunci când facem o dezbatere trebuie să avem toate părțile interesate. Așa am învățat eu în mandatul de 5 ani la Parlamentul European și în Parlamentul Național și ca ministru. Trebuie să avem toate părțile interesate. Nu putem exclude nici companiile, nici avocații, nici asociațiile profesionale, nici membrii Parlamentului, nici Comisia. Deci cred că trebuie să fim toți ca să găsim o soluție mai bună. Dar în același timp, stimate coleg, scuzați că am întârziat să vă dau cuvântul, trebuie să înțelegem că dezbaterea de astăzi, tema dezbaterii este extrem de senzitivă, de sensibilă, pentru că pe de o parte, e nevoie de multă investiție, știm bine că sunt costuri, probabil vom avea state care nu pot să suporte costul implementării tehnologiei 5G. Pe de altă parte, cred că era interesant să știm despre o companie la care avem informații contradictorii și poate că e bine că a dat curs invitației noastre și s-a pus la dispoziția dumneavoastră, a noastră, a membrilor, a presei pentru a răspunde. Nu cred că e nimic greșit că Huawei este astăzi prezent aici. Yes, it's okay.
Well, thank you very much. I don't think it's wrong, but I'm glad to hear that also Nokia and Ericsson are invited too. That's okay. Important for me. Thank you very much.
It's okay. Îmi revine plăcerea să predau microfonul colegului meu, domnul Bogovici, care va modera securitate cibernetică, promovarea încrederii, transparenței și cooperării. De aceea îi spuneam doamnei că la panelul acesta poate era potrivită întrebarea. Please, Mr. Bogovici.
Thank you, Ms. Grappini. Sure, cybersecurity, fostering trust, transparency and cooperation, I think it's very, very important and also very challenging panel. For this panel, as organizer invited, is here Turo Matila, Chair of EU Council Horizon Working Party on cyber issues, is permanent representative from Finland. Unfortunately, Luigi Rebuffi, Secretary General of the European Cybersecurity Organization, ESCO, is not here. So I invite dear colleague to join us. And as we heard in these interventions now and also in questions, I think so that we believe that this technology will continue to improve in all levels of our life. We have some experiences with cyber attacks today and with empowering and developing in 5G technology when we speak that we will have autonomous vehicles, we will have things which will be connected with our health system, connected with transport, connected with water supply, with energy sector, other things. So there is a lot of reasons that we speak about this. I am now second term here in European Parliament, and when we got these priorities for first term of this Juncker Commission, digitalization and digital union was one of very important topic connected with this, that we recognize that people and companies in USA, China, South Korea are faster than we in Europe, and also many questions. What about regulation, about privacy, about security, about influence of this technology on our life, influence on countries, influence on European Union, influence on elections. So a lot of reasons why we speak about these topics. I'm very glad that we got this week this report of when EU coordinated risk assessment of the cybersecurity of 5G networks. Also in our goals for next 5 years, there are things connected with cybersecurity, also to ensure also European money to empower those who will be responsible and to help that people will really trust to this technology, because we all believe in benefits of this big forest, which Mr. Hendricks said, but there are also in forests sometimes people are a little afraid. So I think that it's also in this forest many things what must be done. So I'm very happy that we got a document in which is based on the cooperation of all countries all around Europe, because I'm sure that Europe, as we know, we are not in capacity. I'm from Slovenia, that my country protect our companies, our peoples, but all together with European Union for sure. We speak about a team which is very challenging. We know here was a colleague from Huawei. He got many questions. He also tried to answer to many questions. I'm sure that in the next 1-2 years, which is the agenda to prepare action plan and to empower us and prepare us for 5G technology, which is here between us, that we will find better regulation. But now I will give the floor to Romatila, the only one panelist, so it means that you can be a little longer, but not too longer, because the most challenging part of these are questions, as we saw. So the floor is yours.
Many thanks for the kind introduction, Mr. Bogovic and Madam Chairs, honourable MEPs, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be attending this discussion this evening, representing the Finnish presidency of the EU Council. Please let me first explain to you briefly the approach of our presidency on cybersecurity issues. After that, I will elaborate a bit more on the work ahead in the months to come on 5G network security, and of course, after that, I'm ready to answer your questions. First of all, security is a very important priority for the ongoing Finnish presidency of the Council. We underline the importance of comprehensive security of our citizens and the need for the EU to do more in this area, fully respecting the competence of member states in matters concerning security, and at the same time building on the important work that has been done in the Union during the past 5 years on issues such as countering hybrid threats, EU defence cooperation, and, importantly, cyber security. As we know, the changes in our security environment in Europe and globally that we have witnessed in the past years do take place in cyberspace, just like they do here in the physical reality. The increasing tensions in international affairs, evolving security risks, they are present very much in cyberspace. This underlines the unity of the EU, both here at home in Europe as well as in the international arena. For example, in the United Nations, in the ongoing negotiations in different committees of the General Assembly, there are important discussions taking place concerning cybersecurity, where the unity of the EU, of all member states, is of paramount importance, so that the EU is able to work towards respect for free, open and secure internet, for the applicability of international law in cyberspace, and for the protection of freedoms and rights of citizens and people globally. We are very glad that the strategic agenda of the EU that was approved by the European Council in June pays attention to the importance of continuing to work on increasing cyber security and enhancing member state cooperation in this field in the future, and we are very glad that this is taken into account also by President-elect von der Leyen in her plans for the incoming next European Commission. Another important area where our presidency works at the moment concerns the investments to cybersecurity within the next multi-annual financial framework. Our presidency has continued to work on the proposal of the European Commission from last year concerning the establishment of the European Cybersecurity Competence Centre and Network. Our aim is that in the next MFF, starting from the 1st of January 2021, funds from the EU budget that are dedicated to cybersecurity are used as efficiently as possible in order to develop the competitiveness of European cybersecurity solutions. On the other hand, bringing together expertise in Europe in cybersecurity fields in order to make sure that our European companies, our research community are as competitive in the global market as possible. So in short, cybersecurity is not something that you can address efficiently in a silo of its own. We need to understand that security in cyberspace is part and parcel of our security as a whole in Europe. And our presidency continues to work guided by that principle, building on the existing conclusions of the Council and the European Council, and in good cooperation with all member states and other stakeholders. Specifically on the very topical issue of the security of 5G networks. It's important to understand that 5G technology brings new opportunities for advancing innovation, economic prosperity and well-being in Europe, and the swift rollout of 5G networks is of crucial importance for the competitiveness of the EU as well as for the functioning of our single market. At the same time, the concerns about the security risks related to the new 5G technology are well-founded, and these concerns need to be addressed adequately. Last week, the EU coordinated risk assessment on the cybersecurity of 5G networks was published. Member states agreed on it unanimously in the NIS cooperation group, and this is an important step in the process aimed at ensuring the solid and long-term security of 5G networks in Europe. We welcome this risk assessment as an important achievement where member states cooperated very well together with the European Commission as well as ENISA, the EU Agency for Cyber Security. It's very important for our presidency that in this question, again, the EU is united in the way we approach security of 5G networks. Our presidency is committed to continue the work in line with the Commission recommendation from last March, together with all member states and the EU institutions, with the aim of finding a balanced approach. Because we need to find a balance between our ability to take advantage of the significant economic opportunities of 5G networks, their importance for our economic growth and development, and at the same time an approach that takes into account that we need measures to mitigate the security risks associated with 5G. It's important to define the EU's common position clearly, and it's important for us that still during our presidency, before the end of the year, we are able to express a united position of all member states on this important issue. And in order to give guidance to the work ahead that of course continues well into the future, our presidency will propose conclusions of the Council that we propose to be adopted in the Council in the beginning of September in order to define on a political level the approach, the common approach of member states on this issue of security of 5G networks, underlining here again the importance of finding the balance between taking advantage of the economic opportunities on the one hand and on the other hand addressing the security concerns. And in addition to these conclusions, the work on a more technical level continues, and by the end of the year we hope that we would be able to also agree on a toolbox of mitigating measures on addressing these security concerns. I thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. On the basis of our agenda, we have 13 minutes for questions, so it's not a lot of minutes. We want to have as much as possible questions and be short and 13 minutes to 19:20 on agenda. Okay, who will be the first? Please.
Hi, this is Lauren Sirlis from Politico. I cover cybersecurity at Politico and telecoms, which essentially means I've been covering Huawei for the past year. Turo, this is a question for you. So my question would be, if you read the risk assessment that came out last week, to which every European authority contributed, and the Commission and ENISA also contributed. This looks at non-technical factors as well as technical factors. And my question is, to what extent does certification and standards solve the questions around non-technical standards? And secondly, how do you evaluate the risk of China-based companies who have headquarters in China, who have a large amount of their staff in China? And do you consider the risk of such suppliers, of technology in general, do you consider that risk to be higher than other companies?
Please.
Thank you for the question. Well, first, the EU coordinated risk assessment from last week that I mentioned, it reflects the role of suppliers in building and operating 5G networks and the degree of dependency on individual suppliers. As you can read from the risk assessment, it goes through several different possible risks that are associated with 5G networks, for example, concerning the increased attack surface because of the Internet of Things development, the increasing amount of devices and solutions that are connected or need 5G networks for their functioning. And also, the risk assessment underlines the importance of taking into account possible risks from foreign state or non-state actors. The risk assessment does not make specific mentionings of any third countries or individual companies. I believe that it's important for us to work here with an understanding that we need to be able to develop our security by working based on an up-to-date risk assessment, continuously developing our understanding of possible threats that can come to our 5G networks, our digital infrastructure as a whole in many different ways. So it's important for us to have a comprehensive approach also in the way we define the possible risks. We cannot be naive. We need to be realistic. We have to be informed. We have to be able to analyze the information available concerning possible risks that come in different forms. And of course, in these matters, ultimately, a lot depends on issues that are in the competence of the member states in terms of what kind of regulation, what kind of rules are in place in different member states for concerning mobile network operators, for example, and the security measures that they need to take into account. So what we hope to do on the EU level in the form of the Council conclusions that our presidency has proposed is to define on a political level a common approach. But then those conclusions, of course, will not be a very detailed solution in itself to this question, but it's important to understand the work continues well into the future after our presidency, after the passing of these conclusions. Our security environment keeps on developing. It's important that we continue to cooperate on the EU level and take into account the many different kinds of risks that may be associated with 5G networks and our digital infrastructure as a whole as it continues to develop. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. Please.
Yes, I understand that the transition to a 5G system will require quite a big investment in terms of network and so on, but do you have any kind of an estimate on what would be also the necessary investment to cover the cybersecurity part, be it hardware, software, law enforcement, policing, juridical, or whatever?
Thank you for the question. As a representative of the ongoing presidency of the Council, I do not feel that I would be in a position to make any kind of estimates about what kind of investments is needed by different actors, state actors, private companies, private citizens. I think that in line with the comprehensive thinking about security and a whole of government or whole of society approach on security, I think in very general terms, I believe that it's important that security issues concerning digital solutions, 5G networks and so on, are taken into account duly on all levels of government, as well as in the private sector, in civil society, by individual citizens. Because today the topic here is cybersecurity, and of course security in cyberspace begins ultimately with every single person who uses mobile devices, so also or uses the internet, uses ICT infrastructure. So it's difficult to answer to a question about what would be an adequate level of investment required to build cybersecurity in Europe, because it's important to understand that that concerns all the actors who operate in cyberspace. And of course, they are ultimately responsible themselves for the amount of investments they make. But I would say that in general, looking into the discussions that have taken place in the EU and internationally in recent years, I would say that one very positive development is that both in government as well as in private sector, there is an increased understanding about the importance of investing in cybersecurity. Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Grappini want to show good cooperation between Council and Parliament. She will add something about figures.
Thank you. Mulțumesc mult. Thank you very much. Ok, am un răspuns pentru dumneavoastră estimat. Sunt de acord cu ce spunea domnul Matila, că nu putem ști exact investițiile, dar estimarea este că necesarul de investiții pentru Uniunea Europeană pentru tehnologia 5G este de circa 58 de miliarde de euro la nivelul anului 2025, ceea ce înseamnă o investiție mai mare cu 145 de euro pe utilizator și, sigur, mult mai mare decât a fost investiția pentru 4G, evident, și mai mare decât a fost investiția în 3G. Dar sunt niște estimări și cum responsabilitățile, am spus și în deschidere, sunt partajate, fiecare stat membru aici va decide cât, cum și investițiile totale, sigur, sunt doar estimate la cifra pe care eu v-am spus-o. Vă mulțumesc.
Thank you. Next question. Yeah, please.
My name is Zicheng Wang. I'm a reporter with Xinhua News Agency. I wonder, the United States actually has repeatedly made threats that the 5G security is a precondition for intelligence gathering with certain European countries. I'm wondering if will this be factored into the European Union level decision making in terms of 5G security, or maybe this is a national competence thing, but I wonder if you would like to elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, I have read the news about such requests being made. We or our presidency has not been approached with that kind of request. Our presidency continues to discuss with international partners informally about important security issues, cybersecurity, of course, being one of them. But for us, it's important that the EU has its own approach, and the EU is united in the way we approach an issue of such great importance as the security of 5G networks. So what our presidency concentrates on working is to make sure that member states are united in the approach that we hope to be able to agree on in the Council later this year in December.
Okay. Last question, if there is any interest for the last question. I see that I can conclude this panel. Thanks for your answers, for your explanation of the statement of Council, also European Union. We all heard that we respect the development, and for sure development will go fast, but we should never allow the technology control the way of our life, but we must control the technology and also those who are owners or producers of this technology, and this is our big goal also. And the first step is made by this coordinated risk assessment, and I hope and I believe that we will continue in the right direction. Thank you very much, and I give the floor back to Ms. Grappini. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And good luck. Thank you. Now give the floor for my colleague Zahradal.
Almost.
Sorry, it's a very difficult name to moderate it next panel. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me turn your attention from questions of technology and security a little bit to trade. By coincidence, I have the honor to serve as the first Vice Chairman of the International Trade Committee. A few words for the beginning. We are, in my assessment, in my feeling, we are not living in times, in the atmosphere that is very trade-friendly at this moment. There's a couple of reasons for that. Of course, European Parliament is more fragmented than ever before. Not all groups here are trade-friendly. There is no constant, stable majority in the European Parliament. We see that we have rather something like variable geometry, where different coalitions could be formed around different subjects, and therefore it would be more difficult to predict voting results on any subjects, including trade issues. Secondly, we can see also a bit or quite worrying signals move to more defensive stance. We can see shifting from trade objectives towards societal or environmental goals on the assumption that trade can become an EU global instrument in terms of promoting human rights and fighting climate change and all that stuff. I do not deny that it can contribute, of course, but it can never be the first purpose of the trade policy. And last but not least, of course, we are living in the situation where big guys, which means US and China, are gradually going away somehow from multilateral trade system based on WTO, both in different ways. We have seen US nervous about their growing trade deficit, adopting some protectionist steps, steel and aluminium tariffs, for instance, and also escalating a tariff war with China, and also US continuing blockage of WTO appellate bodies. With China, we have other types of dispute. We have questions of a level playing field, of approach of European businesses and companies to Chinese market, also questions of state subsidies when it comes to Chinese productions, and also intellectual property rights. You might remember that there was a dispute between China and EU over market economy status, which is now over, at least for the time being. We also have this new investment screening mechanism that was adopted by European Union very recently, and that might affect perhaps potentially in the future some Chinese investments to Europe. And also, despite the fact that we have no trade deal with China, even any deal that would be prepared, we somehow advanced in preparing investment deal with China, and according Commissioner designate Phil Hogan, it should be, or could be, or hopefully will be ready to be finalized during 2020. So there's a lot of questions here we can touch, and talking about so-called global value chains, which is again the world we are living in. they tend to amplify the effects of tariff increases, and of course the higher tariffs in general and trade wars in particular may induce firms to shorten and companies to shorten or otherwise reshape their global supply chains. So let me invite and introduce two of our panel speakers, Mr. Torsten Jelinek and Mr. Yves Melan. Is it correct, the pronunciation? Thank you. You did well to take your badges with you. Perfect. Thank you very much. So I would start with Mr. Jelinek, perhaps, who is representing a think tank called Taihe Institute. He's a director and senior fellow in this institute. It's a think tank founded in 2013 with headquarters in Beijing and also some centers in Germany and US. While Mr. Melang is a lawyer, he's a trade and regulations expert and partner in Steptoe & Johnson, very well-renowned legal firm established more than 100 years ago in 1913, based in Washington, but also with many centers around the world, including Beijing and Brussels, of course. So, Mr. Jelinek, the floor is yours.
Mr. Serious, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Dear Chair, honourable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, I think the current ceasefire is for many less certainty, but more or less damage that can be caused by the current trade war. And I think it gives us the opportunity to reflect and ask the question again, why do we have that trade war actually? And maybe a straightforward answer is that particularly for the United States, the current system of division of labor, which is based on comparative advantage, doesn't work out for their favor currently. And more things, of course, related to China. So when you look first on the US side, you will see that since 1975, the United States is running a trade deficit with probably all of its trading partners. And it has created lots of wealth. So the overconsumption and the overinvestment has created the deficit, but of course it created lots of wealth, not just for the United States, also for Europe, and of course also for China. So in this sense, the US did the job of really being an engine for global growth. So what did it do? It mainly outsourced, offshored, what it didn't want to do, where the margins are low, which is in the manufacturing. And when you look at Asia, at first the tigers, the dragon countries, they took it. So they run a surplus, and eventually China opened up and took that surplus. So when you look at who's responsible for the trade deficit, I think China has a responsibility, but is not responsible for that. And an indicator actually of that trade deficit, and that the US is kind of happily outsourcing, offshoring, is when you look at the intermediate parts. So not the finished goods, but the intermediate parts, which make 60% of the export or the import, respectively. And in 2009, at the crash, this part contracted heavily, I think around 50%. Which means that those businesses in China did not purchase those goods from those businesses in the US did not purchase the good from China. So, but today it actually doubled again. So we are back almost to normal level, minus now the trade war situation. But that means actually that from the business side, it just happily went on, right? Outsourcing, offshoring. So, and China, of course, moved from being a cheap manufacturer into a complete supply chain of, a country which can produce things end to end. and moved up the supply chain basically, and competes now over cutting-edge technologies. So what happened actually? So when President Xi came into power in 2013, he pushed for reform actually. This is the so-called supply-side reform, which addresses state-owned companies, which addresses the financial services industry, which is a move from quantity to quality growth, and where technology becomes really important. Just remember ourselves, in the last century, a system collapsed because it did not catch up with technology. If you don't catch up with technology, no one buys your products, you don't get the money in order to purchase and import the necessary goods from outside. So now actually it's not just what's happening now. This advantage the US has, maybe still has, European Union member state have, is in the design, the innovation, the research, is now fierce competition with China. So China has stepped up into that situation, and basically it escalated now in the trade war, which started in 2018, and with a promise to reduce the deficit, as we know, with a promise to bring jobs back to the United States, with a promise to bring American companies back to the United States, and surely kind of to impose structural changes on the China side, and also maybe to confine the growth. Was it successful? No. The deficit grew. No jobs has been added because of that, and no American companies seriously came back. On the contrary, the export is down by 24%. For China, it's minus 4%. The deficit increased last year 8%, now this year 12%, and the gap increased by $420 billion. The US consumer pays that between $600 and $900 per year, and in fact, from the structural point, that it should hit China structurally, the SOEs, it hit actually 90% of the private businesses, of which a large amount are foreign invested. So it was actually self-defeating in that sense. And also US is facing maybe a recession. If it continues like that, it will probably come 2020. The EU might be also hit, or will be very hit, and Japan and other allies. In addition to this outcome, the FDI flow into the US sharply declined to 2008-2009 levels by 40%. That means there is not enough investments coming to create jobs in the US and push the economy. So what happened why is China so resilient here? Might be obviously a winner currently, but this should not deflect that when it happened first, the trade war, when it started, there was a strong psychological toll on the Chinese. The stock market plummeted, but it rebounded quite quickly. It's already back to normal. China was quite clever in the terms of tariffs. It imposed tariffs on US goods where China can source it elsewhere, and in the other countries, and those other countries, it reduced the tariffs. So the lobster, you might know, the lobster case, not buying from the US, but buying from Canada is a great example here. So it was quite clever. Plus, or basically this cushioned the price increase for the Chinese consumers. But there are also structural challenges which cushioned the trade war and gives China more confidence. So if you look at the GDP ratio, already 40% in China is based on consumption. So it actually can cushion the export, right? Then the export to the US is down from 11% to 4%. And then it's in total from GDP, it's down from 36 to 18%. This is below the OECD level even. So this gives a little bit of a confidence for China. But when we look at now the structural changes, I think there is a big change in China, and I will conclude with that. When you look at and there's a progression. When you look at the history, Mao was about to survive and basically stand up. The period of Deng Xiaoping was a period of development and get rich. And the period of Xi Jinping is a period of dignity and get strong. So there is a continuation of opening up, and China knows it very well. Without it, cannot do. There is also, and you see progress also on ownership. And there are good examples related to Tesla, Costco, Moody's, Standard & Poor, from the European or German side, BMW Allianz. So there are a lot of good examples. But if there is a good outcome of the trade war at all, we still have to also agree that it creates a good pressure on China. It's like at the 2002 WTO entry, China used it domestically to push through reforms, because also China is fragmented inside, right? So there are those who don't want too much reform and those who want the reform. So I think in this sense, the trade war has maybe accelerated this one, even though China is very confident. But what should happen, and I will end with this sentence, is that this trade war has to move back to the multilateral system, into the WTO, with mechanisms that create a new equilibrium. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very complex picture of trade relations of China with the rest of the world. And now it's on Mr. Maleng.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, unfortunately, that's not where the global order is going. We're not going to go back to discuss things multilaterally, but we are retreating from multilateral negotiations. I'll give, in 7 minutes, an overview of the impact of the China-US trade war on the EU's commercial, international position on trade. We have lived since the end of the Second World War in a commercially, I'm not talking about the UN, I'm talking about the GATT and the international institutions created for international trade, in a legal order that was created by the United States. And while the EU is definitely a fantastic European project, it was made possible by the United States to a large extent. That order has been evolving and growing, most notably with the end of the Soviet Union, where more than half of our member states joined the EU, and remained largely unchanged. So it evolved until we had a WTO, a dispute settlement body, to solve disputes in a gentlemanly fashion. And that largely started to end in 2015-16, where one crisis happened, the crisis being the new US administration. I'll come back to that in a second. But before that, there were two phenomena already happening. One of them was China's rise. And China was non-existent in the 80s, 70s, 80s as an economy, and I will not say slowly and steadily, but rapidly and steadily, China grew as a global player and became increasingly important for the EU economy, but also for the economy of the United States. And so China's rise has been an opportunity, but for the EU has been a challenge as well, for a number of reasons. State intervention in the economy is one of them, and of course the fact that China is not a democracy being another for other reasons. The other phenomenon that has been there for a while is the US growing insatisfaction with the WTO. And so it's not, it's very loud. Trump is acting very aggressively and decisively, one could say, to have the lines move. But under Bush, under Obama, you already saw very deep insatisfaction with the WTO. And nobody was listening. Certainly nobody in Europe, nobody elsewhere. Nobody was addressing those concerns. And now the crisis. The crisis is that the United States has decided that we need to reform the WTO, and it's going to succeed because in December, the WTO will cease to have a dispute settlement mechanism that works. We won't have an appellate body, so when you disagree with a third country, be it China or the US, about how to solve a dispute, how to interpret the WTO agreements, the many WTO agreements, there will be no place to actually find an answer to who's right, who's wrong. So we will be back to might is right, and there are three mighty countries in the world today. Countries, we'll start with the bloc that is not a country, which is the EU. I think definitely the EU is one of the three gorillas. It's big, and in trade especially, because competencies have been pooled, and so the EU is strong there. The US is probably stronger, and China. And so the crisis is coming, as far as the EU is concerned, the crisis is coming from the United States, not from China. It comes in the way that the WTO was there in order to prevent countries from imposing duties against each other until after they have won a dispute settlement. So you go to the WTO, and after a while, 5 years, a bit longer, you have the right to impose duties because you won in a fair process. And it was there to prevent any WTO member from hitting with duties first. And if you look at what the US is doing now, it is behaving as if the WTO was not there already, because they impose duties for their own internal objectives without any regard for WTO discipline. And they are preventing the appellate body from having of the WTO, of having new members. So intentionally, the United States is preventing the dispute settlement mechanism of the WTO to work. And so the EU is faced with what was almost a sponsor, at least even a protector from a defense point of view, someone who's really upsetting the legal order. And so I think the EU is now having to retreat from the EU, a bit less from the US, a bit less close to the US, and face major trade challenges in the form of duties. So we have now duties against our aluminum and steel. We are afraid of seeing duties on cars. We expect duties on a range of products as retaliation in the Airbus Boeing dispute. And so we have to, which is actually fine from a WTO point of view, those duties, the others are not. It's compliant. Still, it raises issues and challenges, especially in a world where we don't have a place to go to settle disputes with the US anymore. But we had to react to this, and so the EU has an instrument that it used for the first time last year, which is the 2014 enforcement regulation. And for the first time ever, instead of waiting for the green light of the WTO, the EU decided to strike the US with rebalancing duties. Rebalancing, it's to the economic equilibrium between the US and the EU was upset by the duties of the US, and so we decided to impose our own duties to restore that balance. The EU is doing two things now in the face of this challenge. The EU is trying to save the WTO by creating new dispute settlement procedures on the side of the existing ones. And so there's one such agreement with Canada today. And the EU is hoping that more WTO members will agree similar treaties with the EU and with each other, so that at least between those countries there will be a dispute settlement mechanism. That's one thing, and it may or it may not work. The other thing that the EU is doing is to go unilateral itself. And so it's nice to be compliant with international institutions, but it's not nice if you're the only one. And here, the only one would be EU respects, China doesn't, US doesn't. And so if you are in that type of situation, you need to have a tool in order to retaliate or rebalance. And so the EU is actively working now, and that's quite understandable, on making the 2014 enforcement regulation a lot more effective, i.e., and that's going to be the discussions of the next month. When can we retaliate, and how forcefully can we retaliate against third countries? And I would predict that probably the EU will link the strength of the retaliation to the availability of a dispute settlement mechanism. And so you will start to see a number of countries that have agreed a dispute settlement mechanism with the EU, and those that haven't. And in those that haven't, you will have probably the US, and you will have a lot of free riders. And I wouldn't be surprised if all those free riders could be put in the same bucket as the US. We don't have a dispute settlement mechanism. You don't comply with your obligations. I hit you with duties first. And I will finish with a couple of sentences now. The impact of this new normal, which is going to last for a long time, because we are not going to go back to the old WTO. It's going to be a new WTO, and a new WTO will take 10, 20 years to negotiate. So we are going to live in a very different world for the years to come. We may see the EU and a number of countries having dispute settlement mechanisms and working as in the old days, and then see unilateral action on the other countries. That means more duties, quicker duties. In the past, you would always have advance warning when duties would come, because you would have an investigation, because you would have a dispute in Geneva, and it would take some time until rebalancing duties were imposed. Not anymore. Now you see duties from 1 month to the other, and that is going to impact supply chains. And if China is in the bucket of countries that doesn't have a dispute settlement with the EU, definitely that the supply chains with China will be affected. Probably a lot less than with the US, because the US now seems to be actively trying to remove China from its supply chains. I don't think that would be at all in the interest of the EU, but at least there will be more, duties happening more quickly, and so that will make supply chains involving a China element a bit more difficult to manage in the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, you could have seen how complex and difficult is the world of international trade, and how uneasy period we are entering. And if those three big guys on stage, US, EU and China, will not find a new balance, a new equilibrium, then the global economy might suffer in a very short time, and we all, and our states and our nations, will suffer as well. So it's our utmost task to find out a solution. Now, we are running out of time. I'm afraid that Madam Chair will probably not allow me to give you some space for questions, but if yes, maybe we could try to allow you a one question for maybe both our panelists, just not to let you go without any possibility to ask them for something. So is there any single question? If not, then we can leave it. And I would like to thank both of our panelists for their very complex and comprehensive description and introduction to a very uneasy world of the world trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for speakers. It was very interesting, I think. Now give the floor, last panel, my colleague Newton, for international digital cooperation. It's last panel, and I know, please give the floor and invite speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I know we're running out of time. We're all looking forward to a cocktail, I think, in 15 minutes, so let's not lose any time. Listening to this debate, I just want to say one thing. I was at a briefing by NATO, luckily, recently, and they said there were 4 threats, cyber threats, to us in Europe and the West, 2 from disruptors, Russia and Iran, who are just trying to disrupt and cause chaos. They're doing it quite well in their different ways. North Korea, which is trying to steal our money, and if you lose money, that's where it's probably gone, because they're trying to get money to run their economy. And finally, China, which is trying to steal our information. Now, we came here to talk to Huawei and to listen to them, and I personally have to say I'm not convinced. So I think, Mr. Liu, you still have a lot of work to do to make us feel confident that you're not trying to steal our information. This is a serious thing, and I'm sure you're taking it very seriously. Over here we were asked, what about Vodafone? And I'm very happy to say the first speaker I can introduce. Oh, he's arrived already. Oh, very fast work. Okay, so Mr. Reiter, you're Director of External Affairs from Vodafone. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's been a very rich discussion. I'm between you and your drinks, so I will try to hone in on 4 key points. One, which is referring to Madam Chair's starting point, which was the importance of 5G. Because it's very easy in this conversation to forget that we're at the cusp of a rather large transformation of our societies, one which will bring massive benefits. And one of the reasons is, and to dumb this down the most I can, is that everything we've done in mobile industry so far is about people-to-people communications. Even 4G, actually, if you look at the data used on the 4G, it's predominantly for people to watch YouTube on your phone. Unfortunately, that consumes a massive amount of data. There's a limit to how many cat movies you want to see. 5G is actually predominantly a machine-to-machine communication network. And that's why it plays such an incredibly important role in transforming societies, both from the point of view of public services, which is, for example, in e-health, the way that we run our transport networks, our mobility systems, but down to the core issue around our competitiveness. So this is extremely important to get right. So if I start on the positive side, I have unfortunately a little bit of a bad news for Europe. We're entering into what I would describe almost like a moonshot race, quite late and not very fast. So this is an area where we really have to pull together as Europe. We have established the European Communications Code in the last Commission, but there's a lot still to be done. And unfortunately, when it comes to allocation of spectrums, the coordination between member states, the price tag that member states are assuming they would get out of spectrum, and therefore actually crowding out investment in the actual deployment of the applications and the network, we have a long way to go. And both the United States and China are moving really, really fast. So if I had to summarize it, considering this is really important, I would summarize this is probably the first time Europe will play catch-up with China in technology. But that's the situation we put ourselves in. So from Vodafone's point of view, and we have deployed 5G in 4 member states at this point. We're present in 12 member states. We're Europe's largest mobile and fixed operator. We're really keen to be the partner and push this as quickly as possible. But it's ultimately dependent on whether member states want to play the game and really pursue this. So that's on the positive side, yet with the big question marks around whether Europe is prepared to pull itself up with the bootstraps. Now, the second bucket of comments I want to do, and it's 3 key messages related to the very important question around security of the 5G network. And I want to divide that up into security/safety, including the protection of our values. Secondly, resilience. And third, ecosystem. And I think it's very important to not reduce what is an incredibly complex and large question around security to a very narrow question around equipment, network, or even worse, one supplier of equipment. So if I start with the safety and security, Europe actually has a rather strong starting point. We have shown our ability to protect our values, not least by the GDPR. In networks, with respect to security, we already, as operators, not on the request of governments, but as operators, those that are serious, already operate a multifaceted approach to protection of its network, including end-to-end encryption, gateways, separating of the different parts of the network, holding all the keys on encryption. In the case of Vodafone, we don't outsource network management. So the question around security may be new to many governments. It is not new to operators. The reason is very simple. You, as parliamentarians, as well as governments through regulations, have put an onus on us for many, many years on guaranteeing the confidentiality of communications. We take that commitment extremely seriously, which means that it has been on our responsibility, on our shoulders, to make sure that whatever technology we deploy, we will be able to live up to that requirement, and you will lose your license if you fail that. And we're a licensed business. We only exist because governments have given us the right to exist. This is not like setting up any other company. This is actually a regulated industry, which means that we have already at this point, and that's why entering into this conversation, we're sharing with governments, including in the national risk assessment, quite a lot of all the different tools we apply to protect the network. Now, I do want to say that we are really worried about the new normal, which runs the risk of leading to a bifurcation of the internet. This is in absolutely no one's interest. But unfortunately, we are struggling with handling this situation. And that leads me to my second point. The second point is around resilience. The mobile industry and the industry of Europe is struggling from the point of view of security of networks, mainly because of the question around resilience. Resilience is because of the lack of adequate supply and diversity of supply in the supply chain. For whatever reasons, part competitive and other reasons, the supply chain in terms of the vendor base that mobile operators rely on has collapsed In Europe, we're down to 3 vendors. We have, as Vodafone, a really excellent relationship with all 3 of them, and we use all 3 of them. But 3 is not a good number. So what we have done as Vodafone is basically, besides what was referred to by Huawei when we piloted Open RAN or Single RAN in Africa and drove down the cost, thereby providing far greater connectivity to poor Africans and spreading the network further out in rural communities. What we're deploying very hard now is we're having intense discussions with Samsung, whether they can enter as a 4th supplier in Europe. And we have also launched, and we're leading the trials across Europe on what we call Open RAN. Open RAN is a way of completely diversifying the network, moving way beyond what are the existing suppliers, by the fact that you separate what is the software, the hardware, and the integration of the RAN equipment, i.e. the things you put on the base station. So you can buy hardware from one supplier, you can buy the software from other suppliers. And we're working with startups in the United States and in the UK to build software ability to actually come and build a new ecosystem around suppliers, and therefore unshackle ourselves from the risks that come with a limited supply of vendors. And why is that important? Because if you put all your eggs in one basket, it doesn't matter if it's malicious intent or just a software glitch. Your network goes down. So any serious operator will have multiple vendors so as to be able to move traffic if there are any software glitches in the network. And since we're talking about 5G having a massive amount of life-supporting services running on it on a 24/7 basis, we need to make sure that our network is always on. It's nothing to do with the big questions around cyber attacks. This has to do with the resilience. And it's a really, really important question. But for that, we need a very conscious plan to broaden the supply chain, to broaden supply base, to drive diversity. And Vodafone is leading the way in Europe on that. The third question is around the ecosystem. It was referred to by our Finnish colleague, rightly so, that with 5G moving to machine, it basically means that you're connecting far more things onto your network. It's not necessarily a network problem, to be very clear, but you have to ask yourself, are all the stuff that we're connected to the network safe? So one of the things that we did as Vodafone is that we partnered with an organization called Consumer International, which is the international consumer organization in the world, to develop design principles for privacy and security for IoT. Because currently, at this point, we don't have standards upon which we completely feel comfortable we measure and then certify. So we developed, you would call it private standard, but we made sure that we could put it on Consumer International so that they could build an ecosystem and it wouldn't be proprietary for us, so that it would be an open standard that others could join. But we really need to move quite quickly into this space because the deployment of sensors across our various systems, as well as the IoT revolution, we're at the cusp of it, which means that we as Europeans need to think very carefully about how do we make sure there are minimum standards for IoT devices that are sold in the European market. Much like we have minimum standards for television sets so they don't explode and burn down your house, we should have pretty much the same thing when it comes to security and privacy around the devices we connect onto the network. It's not a network security issue, but it's a question around the security of the connected world we're going to live in. So that's the third point, and where we are really keen to work hard, and we have noticed very good movements in the EU as of late to push this envelope, and we're strongly supportive of it. But that's what I wanted to highlight. There's a huge benefit, to repeat, there's a huge benefit with 5G because we're moving to a machine-to-machine world. We are late in Europe, and we have to move faster. We have the question around risks, which are not new to the industry. And as part of the solution that we're looking for the toolbox, just to underline this, because we are accustomed to risk-based approach, because we already apply multi-layered protections to our network, we're very keen on the back of the national risk assessment and the combined risk assessment that the EU published, and the work by the Finnish presidency, that the toolbox emanates into a common, uniform security assurance system of the European Union. One which is, by the way, should be vendor agnostic. It is logical that governments want to know what's the stuff you put into your networks. But the method by which you do that in Europe, and Europe has a tradition of doing it for cars and every other product, is that you set standards, you measure, you test, and since it's software defined, it basically means, in the case of networks, people, in this case, test labs, will have to check the source code. So that's one of the things that we have tabled. We made that proposal in April, and we have engaged very much with governments because we do think there needs to be a uniform response. Europe will not have the capability of having one response in one member state on one standard and another member state going for a different standard. We will not get the scale to drive best practices worldwide in the manner that we should. So Europe should play to its strength, which is its internal market, and that requires us also to have a uniform security assurance system coming out of the exercise around the toolbox. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mulțumesc foarte mult. A fost ultimul speaker din acest al treilea panel și dacă aveți întrebări pentru Vodafone, vă rog. Ați mai pus și altcineva? Asta e.
Lucky me. Lawrence Cerullis again from Politico. Mr. Reiter, I want to follow up on the element of resilience and vendor diversity that you mentioned. You mentioned, I think rightly so, that it's essentially a three-vendor market in the telecom market. 15 years ago, obviously, that was different. And Europe had many, many more vendors. I'm thinking of Alcatel and so much more. And Vodafone largely invested in contracts with Huawei in 3G and 4G. So I wanted to ask you, what is the percentage of Huawei equipment in your 4G networks in a country like Germany, for instance? And how do you look back on that strategy of investing in Huawei so gravely in 3G and 4G if you now look at the vendor diversity question? Thank you.
Actually, the question is incorrect and the facts are incorrect. So we invest in all three vendors. In actual fact, we have good relations with them, all of them, and we deploy them everywhere. Actually, there's more than three when you get to the core of the network, because when you talk about the RAN, i.e. the base station, in practice, Vodafone predominantly uses Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei. When it comes to the core of our network, we predominantly use Cisco, Ericsson, and Nokia, not Huawei. And that's the reason, because we have sliced up the network and how we architect the network, where we make a risk assessment per piece of it, and we basically negotiate with the vendors. Now, the specific question that you asked, so the simple answer is Vodafone overall has about 1/3 of its RAN contracts with Huawei. Now, when you ask specific question around specific markets, I simply could not answer you for proprietary and confidential business information reasons. In other words, all operators are negotiating super hard with the vendors, including Huawei, to drive down the cost so that we can deploy networks more cheaply and therefore reach more of the European citizens. For that reason, we never get into disclosing information, neither around the exact share of individual markets nor around the price that we pay.
Zicheng Wang with Xinhua News Agency again. You just mentioned the term vendor agnostic. Could you elaborate on that? And is that the approach you believe the European Union should be, pursuing in this 5G security standards? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, we do believe that. We are operating in 12 European member states. One of those member states, well, still today member state, is the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has had over the last 10 years a system whereby it has a facility where it goes through the equipment of Huawei that we deploy together with our competitors in the UK. As part of that assessment, they go through the source code. In the exercise of going through the source code, they have found that there is need for improvement in the software engineering of Huawei, which is not strange. If you think about most of the stuff that you know about software, including sometimes your Microsoft operating system, you have to do Control-Alt-Delete and you reboot your computer. Now, in a software-defined environment that we're moving to, software can be a weakness, which means that you're going to have to check how strong it is. We run independent tests by third parties as Vodafone. We do our own in-house tests Yet we find it also useful to rely on a partnership with the government to also look as having a third look at, if you want, the software. And that process has taught us that there are lessons to be learned around software engineering. Those lessons are relevant for anyone who we put into our network. So our conclusion has been that the experience that we have had in one of the markets is an experience that could be replicated and extended into the broader EU based on what the EU defines as the most appropriate way of doing security assurance, including the level of ambition. But once you do it, there's no reason why you wouldn't check everything that you put into your network. If I put Cisco into my core, why wouldn't Cisco be checked from a software engineering point of view to make sure that there is no glitches? Because we're talking about glitches that if a glitch happens, like unfortunately for one of our competitors, not with Huawei in the UK, the network went down for 7 hours. So we do have a responsibility, and we as an operator, in the case of Vodafone, take that responsibility super seriously. But we need a partnership with government to build the capability of doing that. And here's the bad news. If you want to check all vendors across a European footprint, it is not cheap, which means you're going to have to pool resources together. That's why Europe's going to have a common approach. You're going to have to build a European-wide system to doing that. We struggle to recruit the best software engineers on earth, and we are quite successful still. But in these test labs, you need the best of the best, which means you do need to pull the resource from the best of the best in different member states to build the capabilities so that Europe can robustly check whether the stuff that is put into networks in Europe actually fulfills basic requirements with respect to software engineering and stuff like that. I mean, we're not even talking about checking for malicious action here. We're talking about to make sure that the products work as they should when you have live supporting appliances put onto networks, which is basically when we talk about e-health, real-time surgery being done in remote villages, connected to a hospital in future in Europe. You want to know for sure that there won't be software glitches into that.
Sunteți pregătiți? Ok, mulțumesc foarte mult. Se pare că 2 ore nu sunt destule pentru o dezbatere atât de complexă. Dezbaterea a fost, după cum ați văzut, și prezența speakerilor aici extinsă pe 3 panele, pe 3 direcții, pe, sigur, tehnologia 5G, care cred că am înțeles cu toții că vrem, nu vrem, rețeaua generația 5G va fi. Iată, un actor, Ericsson, estimează că până în 2024 vom avea circa 9 miliarde de abonamente. Problema e că, da, nu stăm în loc cu tehnologia. Ideea de a face această dezbatere este să vedem cum asigurăm securitatea. Și reprezentantul Consiliului a spus foarte clar ce vrea să facă Consiliul, ce vrea să facă Comisia, ce poate să facă Consiliul și Comisia, pentru că sunt și responsabilități ale statelor membre. Statele membre, așa cum a spus deja reprezentantul Consiliului, pot lua o serie de măsuri, cerințe de certificare, teste, control. Sigur, trebuie armonizate pentru piața internă a Uniunii Europene, dar pot fi luate aceste măsuri și statele membre în plus au dreptul de a exclude societățile de pe piețele lor din motive de securitate națională. Deci nu e așa chiar liberă piața fără niciun control. Mă bucur că ați fost într-un număr atât de mare. Vreau să le mulțumesc colegilor, pentru că dacă noi cei 4 nu decideam împreună să facem această dezbatere, probabil n-ar fi avut loc. Eu sunt în Comisia Piață Internă și vă spun sincer că 5 ani cât am fost în mandatul trecut nu am văzut o asemenea participare la o dezbatere publică, la o conferință. Asta se pare că și datorită speakerilor și datorită colegilor care au mobilizat și datorită temei. Nu ne oprim aici. Eu voi spune concluziile acestei dezbateri, le voi prezenta în cadrul Comisiei Piață Internă ca vicepreședinte, dar le vom transmite spre comisarul care va fi pentru piața internă și, evident, și pentru comisarul pe justiție care are în portofoliu protecția consumatorului. Vom ține legătura, sigur, cu măsurile pe care președinția finlandeză le transmite la următoarea președinție și vă asigur că voi urmări urmări cu interes ce se va întâmpla. Noi, eurodeputații, suntem foarte interesați să nu punem bariere, eu sunt fost întreprinzător, să nu punem bariere în calea afacerilor, să promovăm cercetare, inovare, tehnologii noi, dar concomitent să asigurăm securitatea cetățenilor, securitatea afacerilor și o competiție corectă în piața internă. Vreau să închidem aici, să vă mulțumesc foarte mult, să mulțumesc colegilor, speakerilor și să fim în stare noi, iată aici Uniunea Europeană, dar și lumea globală, să trecem la a cincea generație 5G fără a avea vreun efect negativ asupra cetățenilor și afacerilor. Vă mulțumesc foarte mult. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, my colleagues.
See you next week. Thanks for this opportunity.
It was very difficult. Thank you.
Sorry, I promised a cocktail.